and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone here this evening. We have an agenda before us. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is to consider the approval of that agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening? Dennis?
Yes, Mayor. I would like to request that number 15, the approval of the Reinhardt sponsorship agreement, be pulled from the agenda. We are 98% done, but that last 2% requires that we address this at the next meeting.
Is council okay with pulling agenda item number 15 from the agenda? Any other changes to the agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. Move to agenda item number 3.
Yes, it is.
Agenda item number 3 is a public hearing. This is a public hearing on the ice and snow removal and weed elimination on private property. I will call on, Glenn, are you going to handle this?
Dennis?
I'll call on Dennis Simpson to conduct this public hearing, and then following the public hearing, then we will consider the resolution. We do have 4 billings that would be part of this public hearing. Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I do not know how often it happens, how often the city is asked to enforce mowing, weed elimination, or snow removal. But I anticipate that, I expect that after it does happen, most of the homeowners do pay the bill. But there is a procedure under Minnesota law. If the bill is not paid, then there's a process the city can use to assess those costs back against the property owner through the special assessment for payment of taxes. We have 4 separate bills that were not paid, and so we're asking that those be assessed against the property by way of taxes. Each of the bills has been submitted. You will note it's usually about a $50 or $70 charge. There is a $50 administrative fee that's assessed, and a small amount of interest has accrued against each unpaid bill. The city has hired Teagues to perform the work. The city has paid the bill. Now this is an opportunity for collection back by the city. Now I understand, Mr. Bayer-Kohler, no, I think there are insufficient administrative fees. It is not sufficient to capture all of the costs. Minnesota statutes now requires that we go through a publication and a notice to these property owners and conduct this public hearing. So the administrative fee is not sufficient to cover all the publication costs. So that's probably a policy discussion that does have to occur, that in the future, if we do this, what is an appropriate additional charge so that the city doesn't incur extra expenses that is not reimbursed. This notice was published, and notice was sent to each of the property owners.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Is there any member of the audience that's here to speak as part of this public hearing? Any comments from or input from the city council as part of the public hearing? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So move.
Second. Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. And then the second action would be the resolution that would adopt the assessment for the ice and snow removal and weed elimination. Any questions about the resolution?
I'll move the resolution adopting the assessment for ice and snow and weed elimination.
Second.
Motion by Larry, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes.
So we can charge an administrative fee, and we could increase that if we need to.
Yes, we could.
And,
Yes.
and so is that something that, the city administrator should maybe look at?
I think in the finance department also,
Okay.
because they're the ones that the bills ultimately come to, and I don't know what the publication is, but usually it's, and every time we send something for publications, it's $120, $150, so that's additional.
I guess I'm wondering, is the fee itself part of an ordinance, or is it part of just our fees schedule?
Our fee resolution.
What's that?
Our fee resolution. It's
Okay.
Our fee schedule.
Okay, so it will be looked at then?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then just a point of order, Nick or Jane, is there a reason why the approval of the minutes is not on the,
I haven't had time to type in.
Okay.
them.
that's fine, that's fine.
Sorry.
Thank you, and I know, and that's understandable, we were in, we moved up because of the election,
Yes.
so.
And it's because of the election work involved that I don't have them done.
That's fine. We'll move on then to agenda item number 4. That motion did pass. Agenda item number 4 is the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the consent agenda on the screen. So on the consent agenda this evening, consider the authorization to declare a vehicle as surplus property for the police department. Consider the approval of the resolution declaring the cost to be assessed for the removal of a diseased tree on private property in order the preparation of the proposed assessment and calling for a public hearing. And then consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
So move.
I'll second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll move then to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 8, is the consider the approval of the Spirit of Community sculpture agreement with the artist Randy Walker. So with us tonight is Scott Vandermellen, Director of Community Services. Scott?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you well know, from this past summer, a contract was approved for Randy Walker, the artist secured for the sculpture project out at the Red Baron Arena. I believe Randy was extended that contract at the end of July. He had some hesitation in terms of returning that contract signed based on the length of the warranty period. And so through discussions with Jim Schwartz, who extended that contract to him, made some contacts in the cities with legal attorneys that work with these kind of projects, check on the standard, what is the standard on the warranties, and the typical standard for a project of this nature and dollar value is 1 year. Our initial contract that we had extended to Randy was 7 years, and so through some quick and very, very amicable negotiation with Randy, we agreed to 3 years. For comparison, Randy just completed a project in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it was a $500,000 project, and the warranty on that was 3 years. So our project isn't a comparison in dollar value, but that gives you kind of an idea in terms of the standard. So other than that, there were some language changes that we went through with Dennis, and Randy has already returned a signed contract to us in a very timely fashion. So we're just looking for your approval so that the project can move forward.
Dennis, you reviewed? Do you have any comments?
No, I believe Scott said it properly. There were some wordsmithing issues, of course, but
John DeCramer, you were our representative on the art committee. Do you have any?
No.
Okay, any questions for Scott? If not, you have the agreement before you. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the contract and agreement. Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Elaine. Discussion? If not, any discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Move to agenda item number 9. Agenda item number 9 is consider the approval of the Senior Citizens Commission yearly contract with both the Marshall Area Senior Center, Inc., and Lutheran Social Services. So Scott, are you and Barb?
What a wonderful day out there, huh? The contracts are coming before you. They are the same as they were last year. LSS is paying us 18 cents per meal prepared on site, and they provide a value both to the clientele that they serve and also to the community. And they also provide a service to me and within my budget as I use them as a source for meals at different times throughout the year when we have some very special projects. Of course, their charge is $4 per meal, and if I went out, it would be anywhere from 10 to 15 per year. So they do provide a great service, like I said, within the community, serving those that are 55 and older, and also those who are homebound. And then with the Marshall Area Senior Citizens, that is remaining the same as last year. We currently have over 600 members, and just for instance, I'm always excited when I come and get to talk about them because there's another instance of those individuals continuing to give back within our community. And also with this contract, if you approve it, I would like you to note that just last year they went on and did fundraising, and they replaced all the chairs in the dining room and replaced the microphone system with a value of about $7,300, and that was just last year. They continue to do that on a regular basis. Before that was a project where we replaced the tile in the hallway at the senior center, and they seen the bathrooms there, and they said, hey, they're doing the hallways, let's just complete this project. And then they paid over $3,000 to have the bathrooms done. So I truly believe that they do partner with the city very well, and they're always willing to step forward when needed.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
We will first then, open up for any questions that the council may have for Barb.
With regard to the Lutheran Social Services contract, it's 18 cents for each meal. And you said it was that last year. Has it been at 18 cents for quite a while? And have
No. I
we
can
done
give
a
you the
comparison with other communities as to what they charge?
We receive the highest amount of reimbursement throughout the entire region that they serve, which is all of, it's all of western Minnesota. It goes way up to Moorhead, so it's a huge area. Most of them are paying 10%, and some sites are not getting reimbursement at all. So we are definitely on the high end. The history, I started 21 years ago. Western Community Action was providing the Meals on Wheels at that time. We were getting 3 cents per meal. About 3 years later, we got it up to 4 cents per meal. Then it went to Mankato, and we got it up to 10 cents per meal. And then when Lutheran Social Services took over, we went up to 20. And now a couple years ago, we dropped it down to 18 because they wanted it to go to 14. And so we've been keeping it at 18.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
I think this is a great service. Not only does it provide some income for the senior center, but also the services, like Barb said, as far as preparing meals, et cetera, that we can buy at a much more reasonable rate than if we had to have them catered in. And I know that Barb does a wonderful job managing that whole department. I would move the recommendation or agreement.
Motion by Larry. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by John. Discussion? The point of on the motion, this is for the agreement with Lutheran Social
That's correct.
Services. And then will we have a separate action recommended for the agreement with the Senior Citizens Center?
Okay.
Or do you have them both on the same motion?
All it says is approve attached agreement as stated.
They're two
Oh.
separate agreements.
We only have
If that
the,
helps you at all, they're two separate agreements, yeah.
She's got the motion,
There's no reason it can't be one.
Yeah.
And
I
I'll
guess-
specify both of them when I type the minutes.
It says in here, Citizens Commission yearly contract, Marshall Area Senior Dining, and also Lutheran Services. I assume they were as one.
okay. Thanks for clarifying the motion, and that's in agreement with your second. Okay. Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 10. Agenda item number 10, request for approval of the adult basic education lease agreement with Lyon County. Once again, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you well know, Lyon County leases office space for our ABE program. And prior to my arrival in Marshall, the school district, and Bruce Lamprecht in particular, had been working on a 4-year deal, and that could not be agreed upon. So the recommendation was to move forward with a 1-year agreement based on the per square footage rate in front of you. And that has been approved by the Marshall School District. And so we're asking for your approval tonight. And then I believe, and Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we would reach back out to the county the first of the year to restart discussion on a 4-year agreement.
I believe that's the plan.
Okay.
Okay. Questions for Scott on this lease? John? And then Glenn.
Some of the reasoning for the not coming together yet on the 4-year.
Yeah, John, I couldn't answer that. I wasn't a part of the negotiation process. That was done via the school district and the county, so I can't speak to the obstacles that may have been in place. Dennis, I don't know if you were familiar with any of those as well, but
I am not, but I just think it's the workload of the county administrator at the present time trying to wrap up that construction project. I think it's more time demanding than he had anticipated. So I think the 1 year said let's live with it now, and then we'll address it.
Delay things for a year,
Yes.
basically.
right.
Glenn?
Just a couple items here. I know it was going to be a 1-year agreement with 4 additional years, and so that would be 17. And I was wondering, on one of the pages here, paragraph 19.1, it talks about terminating June 30th, 2019. That really is not effective at all then, for now anyway. That's what we were hoping to do, or?
Yeah, I think there were some 3-year discussions in there sometime, and
Okay,
so
so that's okay.
that's more of a typographical.
Okay.
We did agree on 1 year.
Yep.
Effective
Till
July-
June 30th
till June
of
30th
2017. Yes.
Right.
So it is understood, at the end of this year, we're going to negotiate new terms and everything?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as it indicates in our information here that the 4th quarter rental payment is going to be paid by the Marshall School District. So I'm just trying to understand how this all works here. So are they making all the payments?
They make all the payments. They're the fiscal agent.
But we
Yes.
still agree to it? and
Right.
so-
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So we will correct that 19.1 year. Okay. Other questions? If not, you have the recommendation for the approval of the lease agreement for 1 year with Lyon County for the Adult Basic Education Center. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by John, is there a second? Seconded by Elaine. Discussion? If no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Scott. Agenda item number 11. This is the request from Schwann's Shared Services LLC to rezone property from a R4 higher density multiple family resident district to a B2 central business district. Location is 114 South 5th Street. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And this agenda item really involves this one and the next one. It's an issue of utilizing the property for certain uses that's not permitted under its current zoning. So the first thing for the request was to rezone the property, and the property that's involved is this piece, adjacent to South Fifth Street, just behind the beverage plant. So if you take a look, if you're all familiar with that property is, we could go to the next agenda, next picture, and it shows the okay. There's the existing zoning with this area being industrial, this area being business, this area being residential. And the request is to change the zoning of this property from R4 higher density residential to B2 central business district zoning to allow the property to be used for parking. And if you know the area, there's been significant discussions about, lack of parking in this area, both for the county office areas and for Turkey Valley Farms. And currently, they do utilize their adjacent property for parking for the beverage plant. And whether or not this property then would be used by the beverage plant or leased to others with significant parking needs in the area, that is a separate discussion. But the intent of the request is to change the zoning to allow for parking on that half-block area. So if you want to go to the next picture, that would be the recommended zoning, rezoning of that area. It's directly connected to this zoning. It's not a spot zoning issue. It's essentially being used for that purpose at the present time. And we did have some discussions with properties around this lot that they were concerned about the noise of the trailers that were parked there, creating noise next to the residential areas adjacent to the property. What we did find out, however, was that the semis being stored there weren't reefer units. They were just trailered units and weren't running. So they weren't creating the noise issue that the adjacent property owners had thought. The noise was being created by the adjacent properties. So that's the first step, but I want to just discuss the procedure here. The issue then was to rezone it to create this additional parking area. And we do have recommendations for that, in that there should be buffer strips and green space surrounding that parking area to provide a buffer between that property and the adjacent residential properties. So if you could go back to the first aerial photo that we have, you can see that these are residential properties, and that owner has put up fences. They're kind of offset fences that deflect some of the noise from that area. These areas across the street are also residential properties. And so in the discussion of the rezone that we had for development of the parking, we recommended buffer strips along Fifth and along this property, as well as a green screen, we'll call it, of vegetation or trees or bushes to minimize noise and visibility from the parking area. I think I'll stop there and ask Ilya if there's any other concerns that were expressed concerning the rezone.
Just the sound.
Just the sound. And we did check into these. These are the units that they thought were the reefer units that would be running, but they weren't.
There's probably more noise from the roof fans and things at Turkey Valley than there is from any of those trailers.
Correct. And that's significantly off-site, so it wouldn't be immediately adjacent. You can see this parking is currently being used by this property for their use, but would it be a better spot for relocating some of the other parking in the neighborhood? The inclusion of the new facilities at the county, will they need some more off-street parking? It's something that considers our concerns. So
The parking access would be off of Fifth Street then?
parking access, this is an alley, so access could be from either direction.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is an alley too, and we were thinking about, well, is that really necessary anymore, being, you can see where the paved parking is now, the paved driveways are now. And we discussed whether or not that this was necessary, and we determined that it wasn't, except for there's a storm sewer line running to the corner of this property that comes down to the alley. We may have that discussion in the future to combine the two parcels and consider a permanent easement over the property just for storm sewer purposes.
I have one input about that. I actually use 6th Street quite a bit, and with the semi-traffic that comes out of Turkey Valley, and the fact that 6th and Main is not a controlled intersection with a stoplight, the traffic can back up all the way to that alley trying to get onto Main or across Main. So a lot of times if you're stuck there, that's one of the last cut across that you have to get to 5th Street to a stoplight.
And that would be either this street
Right.
or the alley crossing. And we would not be considering vacating that alley.
Okay,
It would just be this portion going, dead ending
Got
into
it.
this property.
okay.
So, I know I got into the next one a little bit, but you really should know about the potential uses and direction of the planning commission too, with respect to the rezone.
But the reality is this, this area has been used most recently for the construction staging area and not for residential.
This area right here. There was actually a couple of houses here that were demoed some years ago.
About 2 or 3 years ago
Yeah.
they came out.
Other questions for Glenn? If not, what is the council's wishes on the request to rezone this property from R4 to a B2?
I'll move the ordinance to rezone the property.
Motion by Larry, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 12, this is the request of Schwann Shared Services LLC for the variance adjustment permit to reduce the landscaping requirements for the property at 114 South 5th Street. Glenn, you touched on that in the previous item. Anything more you want to add?
The only additional thing is, it is a reduction of the current ordinance for the square footage of green space. So you can see that we are recommending a reduction of the required green space on the property to specifically 10 feet wide along South 5th Street and the 10-foot wide area on the north side adjacent to this property, along with a buffer planting screen. So those, it's a softening of the requirements for landscaping, but what the planning commission thought would be okay for that neighborhood.
John, did you have a
I
point?
had a little confusion on that for me. So the buffer strip, are there trees then involved in that buffer strip, or?
Just green space. You can see that there are, I think, 3 big trees there now. There was no intent to take those out of there.
Okay.
So it will have some trees on that side already, within that 10-foot buffer strip. Go ahead, Elliot.
The ordinance, the ordinance actually describes what the buffer screen is. It's at least 6 feet tall and at least 80% opaque. So basically, it's not really trees, it's more like bushes. or evergreens.
But that's on this side.
Right,
this
that is
north
just
side.
on this side,
On
correct.
this side, we
Right.
only required the 10-foot buffer strip.
Correct.
But understanding that they weren't going to be tearing out the trees as far as
Correct.
we knew.
Okay.
Is that a 12-month opacity then? Is that, so it has to be like an evergreen and not a leaf vegetation? It couldn't be like a hedge?
Yes, whatever they come up with, it's the 80% opacity is in the ordinance. So, but again, whatever they come up with in landscaping wise, it's.
But is our opacity, is that requirement that goes 12 months out of the year? Or is it winter only, or summer only?
We did not
We did not
address
specify, we did not address it. It's,
question at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
John?
Just a comment, especially last week when we also had a discussion on trees. I believe in last week there was a study that was released, and I want to say by the state of Minnesota, regarding trees in communities and residential areas, and that it's not only for the noise and things, but with the shade and the trees, and especially with diesel trucks, trees have a tendency to remove the pollutants from the air. So there's a lot of advantages of not only keeping those trees, but keeping that requirement for having those trees. So that in itself is going to reason for clarification. Glad to see that they're planning on keeping those. So, thank you.
Very good. Greg?
And another question, item 6 in the recommendation talks about all additional parking shall be hard surfaced, and I think you had said gravel.
No, as a matter of fact, there is some granular parking here right now because of the additional work that was done across the street. We are anticipating that any hard surface would not be gravel.
Good, okay. Because we have storm intakes there, that would just load the storm intakes, and, okay.
You know, I need to let you know, though, that when we consider gravel, we consider that as a hard surface when it comes to our stormwater system. Okay? So, Ilya,
I-
comment on the
I think we-
definitions are different for different sections of our code.
That was not a condition of the staff, that was a condition of the planning commission.
Right.
And I don't know what they had in mind, but I believe they still thought about asphalt
Right. Asphalt or concrete.
or concrete, right?
Right.
Because you could do gravel with chloride or with a polymer too,
To keep dust down.
right, to keep it stable.
And you can also get it so that it's less pervious
Right,
by doing that.
Yep.
And in our stormwater ordinances, gravel is considered hard surface, but not with respect to our building code items.
okay, thank
Hard
you.
surface and parking to us are, if they're designated parking spots, need to be concrete or
Oh, asphalt.
asphalt. Other parking areas can be gravelled if not required by the, by the building usage.
Okay.
So we do allow gravel in some places, but the intent of the planning commission was for any extension to be hard surface.
Okay, thank you.
There's no timeline as to when that has to be done, if at all.
Only if they expand it for that purpose. So if they expand this area for parking, they would have to do it prior to having parking there.
And generally, variances have a 1-year limitation.
Yeah.
They expire in 1 year.
Any other questions? Larry?
What's, did you say was hard surfaced under now?
All
What is
this.
it? Yeah, what is it though?
Concrete.
That's
Yeah.
all concrete?
Yeah.
And gravel.
Gravel is
Right.
about this area right here. This is green space, but it's been used for parking construction materials on it. So it's a
Where all
little-
that stuff
little
was
bit
parked is
in disrepair.
Basically is.
It used to be lawn, yeah.
Right, it was long.
Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion on the variance adjustment permit.
I move the variance.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by David, to approve the variance request with the conditions as outlined. Discussion on the motion.
I just have a quick question for Glenn again. I know that they were concerned about the noise in the apartments next door, and We had thought it was the reefers, but it's not the reefers.
It's not the
But it's still
reefers.
noisy. But so
Still
there's,
noisy.
there's nothing that can be done about the noise then?
I'll say no, not realistically. If you want to, again, discussion of the noise and odor shouldn't leave the site, that's not possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As just a side note to Councilman Barakoler's question or comment, the state and federal noise laws are pretty specific about noise levels at property lines, and those studies can get fairly involved. But, you know, there are things, everything's possible with an expenditure, and I don't know what they are. We've had conversations back when a couple of businesses over by Couture's were still operating, doing nighttime drying and that type of thing. So there has been some study work done. My experience in that area is there's noise that's up there, but I don't think any of it reaches the thresholds. I've never brought a, excuse me, a decibel meter out to actually look at it. But if those persist, there are avenues that we could pursue to at least get that information for the property owners to better study that, to see what's out there.
Thank you.
Someone measured the noise in that area, and it was not excessive, because there were complaints about the noise
Yeah.
from the turkey farm, and there was we measured someone, I think it was the guy who was doing all the training, safety training, because at the device, and he measured the noise somewhere in the vicinity of 5th Street, and it was within the
Right.
state limits.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll move then to agenda item number 13. Agenda item number 13, consider the authorization for the rental agreement between the City of Moorhead and the City of Marshall for the hazmat training trailer. This is an extension of the current lease at the same rate, correct?
Correct.
Anything more to add on this?
No, I think this is just a regular hazmat training trailer
Any,
that we approve.
okay, thank you. Any questions on this agreement? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion
I'll
by
second.
Larry, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14, consider the professional services agreement for the Commerce Park Stormwater Study and Michigan Road Street and the utility design. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If we could go, there might be a aerial photo of the area. Well, maybe there's not an aerial photo. So you're probably all familiar with the Commerce Park area that we've recently acquired for the development for additional industrial park sites. And included in that will be a request to the state for a deed grant for infrastructure improvements for the development specifically of industrial facilities. There you go. Good job. And the issue is that the deed grants program gets money designated for these types of programs, and then when the money runs out, and then they do another appropriation. We've been working with Cal Brink from EDA and Chamber concerning that specific deed request. And if you recall, immediately adjacent to this area is the Sonstagard development area. And if you could just move that up. Yeah, there. It's a real similar type development and grant request in that Lake Road and its connection to Trunk Highway 68 is almost identical to what we have going on for this project. This project will be a safety improvement project at the intersection, which is already under design through the TED grants program. as well as then the extension of Michigan Road and the water, sewer, stormwater, streets, curb and gutter, everything associated with that extension down to what used to be called 240th, now it's Pacific Avenue. The reason for us coming forward with this project and being consulted is twofold. Number one, they would like to see plans and specs ready to bid by December 15th of this year in order to qualify for the new, the D grant guidelines. The other project, we provided schematic drawings and the concepts for application were approved subject to full development and commitment to the project, and that one went forward. This one will not go forward without design plans and specs. Just a little different tweak to the deed process, and maybe that was because of they had several different applications, but no real commitment, we'll call it that. But several applications and, not enough money to go around, and so they said, okay, let's make it the requirements that you develop full design plans and specs. So that's what this is, and our issue with this development is a stormwater issue. The stormwater that comes from essentially this portion of the property then comes down, flows down to this area, and ultimately goes past this pond all the way to the diversion channel, piped. The pipe already exists under Lake Road because we didn't want to dig up Lake Road or bore that in the future. So we do have stormwater and water main already extended to this location on this side of Lake Road. So that's already sized. There are new stormwater regulations that also involve newly developed properties to be able to infiltrate 1 inch of rainfall within their own property or take care of it in another fashion, like developing a larger stormwater pond or different types of underground storage, or there's a multitude of things, but it has to be addressed that way in the design considerations. And Bolton and Mink has been the City of Marshall's long-term stormwater expert in not only our diversion systems, but really all of our stormwater systems that we have here. Now, in the development of this pond, we're also located just off of the airport runway, of the crosswind runway. Okay? So that enters another factor into the pond can't be an open pond like this one was, the existing conditions. It has to be a dry pond located within 2 miles of the airport. So any size pond that is developed has to be able to drain the 100-year event in 48 hours. So then, once you know that, and you are developing the pond and system to drain to Channel Parkway, what's better to do? There's 2 methods of taking care of stormwater. One is by gravity, and if you're going to do it by gravity, you have to have a larger pond to create that same holding area to discharge, or and then regrade your entire site to allow the elevation of Michigan Road to accommodate surface water drainage, or the installation of a pumping station that pumps it directly to the channel. So that pumping station concept then is probably past our expertise. So that's what we're asking Bolton and Mink to do, is to identify the 2 alternatives and the costs associated with each. Either it's going to be increased dirt moving costs or increased pumping station and long-term O&M costs. And that needs to take place in the next month and a half. Now, December 15th isn't a drop dead date. Whenever they come into, whenever they're complete enough for the application for deed, we'll be submitting them. We do list December 15th on the agreement. That's the intent. But this was already a week old. So it might be December 22nd by the time it really gets done. But this is a tall order to be able to get done. And of course, the purpose for it is for development of this project, for the availability of an industrial property, shovel-ready, by 2018. So it's not that it's going to be ready this year, even by doing a fast track and doing this project this way. It'll still take a whole full year of construction for availability in 2018. And that, I think, would be the kind of the timeline.
However, some of the, one of the large industrial prospects could actually be under construction at the same time that the road was under construction.
That is correct.
2017.
That's correct.
Craig?
Is it,
And Larry?
is it possible, Glenn, that looking at that pond, would the elevations be there to do an engineered infiltration pond?
No.
Versus the pumping, so we wouldn't have enough depth through like a sand filter or sand bottom or a granular bottom infiltration bed?
It's a great idea, but you would have to construct it. In many locations around the state, your type of soil dictates whether or not infiltration basins are feasible. When you have clay soils, they're not.
I'm
So you
talking
could
about,
construct them.
I'm talking about the clay, like the clay base with under drains and the granular on top of that. So it's like a filter bed and not going into the groundwater, but still with a drain pipe out, but not pumping to give it that infiltration. So the ability to get rid of the 1 inch of stormwater in 48 hours.
Correct. For the individual properties, that's correct. You can do that on site. You couldn't do it for the entire area.
And that's what you're talking about now, is designing a pumping station that handles the entire property in that triangle of remaining Sonstegard.
All of this area. It
Right.
handles all the stormwater runoff for the entire 150 some acres.
But you're talking about enlarging a storm pond with a
We are
pumping
not.
station.
No, it takes a completely separate ponding system. You can't connect to this one.
So we would have no water balancing, holdback, or at all. We would just be draining that with a straight pump.
With the restriction of the size of pipe discharge, allowing it to discharge within 48 hours.
So where are we holding that water? Where are we holding that rain event?
Right here,
That's what I mean.
yeah,
Okay.
in that triangle.
So, Glenn, is that a wetland?
This,
That pond?
this is a wetland, a designated wetland. And if we want to give that for just a second, there's a designated wetland in each one of these two ditches within the township road and adjacent highway. Now, how do you get a designated wetland in a ditch? That's
That's the core.
That's right. And so we have to mitigate that as well. Okay, and that's fine as long, it is, what I think happened is many years ago, this was probably a wetland. And they built a roadway through it. And they only addressed the area that was including the fill area for the roadway. So the remaining part of that wetland was never taken out of the wetland system, even though, okay, sometimes there's some cattails there. So, yes, we do have to address the wetland issue here. This one used to be a wetland bank. That's completely filled. I mean, there's no available credits in that wetland bank. The only one that we know of that's available is part of Menards. Menards has developed that area.
They have credits left on
They have
theirs.
credits left on theirs. But we shouldn't need them for this development, because we have to have it dry anyway.
But there would be other credits that would be available in the area.
In the area,
Lyon
if we
County,
needed
for
them.
instance.
And so, this is a little bit of cart before the horse, but we will be coming to the council at a future meeting concerning creating a special assessment district for these costs. And I won't even go there tonight, because I'll go there on our next meeting, because, special assessments on city-owned property that you're going to be developing for industrial park use. Whether that makes sense or not, we don't know. But if you don't start the process, it can't be special assessed.
I know this is probably a question way too early in the game, but so if we design that pond with a pump discharge, and the pump, for whatever reason, fails, the only thing we flood is either the pond, which we don't because it'll overflow the old way. The only thing we violate is the 48-hour holding time.
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Glenn,
John, and then Glenn, and then John.
Go ahead, Glenn.
well, had a question about the gravity only or pump station. That's one of the major reasons we're doing this, is so they'll give us information about that. Do you feel like it's clear in the contract that they're required to provide us details and cost estimates as to how much each one will cost, and then also a recommendation as to what they think would be the best way to go?
Yes. Specifically, I talked to Dan Sarf from Bolton and Mink concerning exactly what you said.
So it's clear to them and in the contract that that's a requirement?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
John?
And then just going back in the original, we're doing this because it's a requirement of getting the grant. Either if we don't do it, there's no chance of getting the grant. If we do it, there's no guarantee that we'll get a grant.
That's correct.
And then the whole development of this area, which I know is of concern from MMU, of when do they need to project this into their budget, is really yet still dependent on that grant.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's in their budget, and we have an agreement that says if we get grant funding, their participation is reduced by the appropriate amount of the water infrastructure.
One last question here on, once we get the information about whether it's a gravity or a pump station, we'll have to make a decision as to what to do. Is that something the engineering department would decide, or is that something you come back and talk to us about, or?
Yep, we would have a report and a presentation at council and the pros and cons, because there are pros and cons. The long-term maintenance cost of a pump station may be significant. All depends upon how much it rains. But the upfront costs of the dirt work can be as much as the construction of a pump station.
Okay, thank you.
And dirt work has maintenance too.
Dirt work has maintenance too, but generally that will be the new property owner's
Right.
responsibility.
Any other questions? If not, you have the agreement before you that is discussed.
I move authorizing entering into the professional services agreement for the study and utility design with Bolton and Mink.
Motion by Craig, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Larry. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes.
Just one point on that. So it's a cost not to exceed 50, so it could be quite a bit, could be less than 50,000.
It could be less, but we looked at real in-depth with our staff. It's a good price.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll move then to agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 15 was removed from the agenda. So agenda item number 16 is consider appointments to various boards and commissions. The council did meet in special session earlier prior to this meeting and interviewed candidates for different boards and commissions, and based on those interviews, I would recommend that Bill Cole be appointed to a first term on the library board, that Kelly Loft be appointed to a first term on the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and that Renee Subi be appointed to an unexpired term that will end February 28th, 2018 on the Community Services Advisory Board. I would offer that as a recommendation and entertain a motion from the council to affirm.
I'll move the recommendation.
Motion by Larry, is there a second? Seconded by Craig. Discussion?
Question, when you said, Mayor, first term for Bill Cole, did you mean a full term? Because
That'll
he
be
is a-
his first full term, yes, because he is completing a partial term that was
Okay.
less than half.
So he's not a new member, but he would be a continuing member.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yep. Other discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 17. Agenda item number 17, Commission Board Liaison Reports. Actually, mine have not met since we last met, and of course, we last met a week ago. So, Craig?
Nothing to report?
Larry?
Never mind, I've met.
Len?
Nothing to report.
John?
None.
David?
Yesterday, the Airport Commission met to visit with the consultants about our long-range planning project. I was not able to attend because of work commitments. And Glenn, looking at the documents, I gathered this was more of a review and consult rather than a decision-making step, right?
Yes.
But am I correct that the goal is to have the report finalized by April? Does that sound right?
August would be the final date,
August of 2017.
correct?
So a long-term project for long-term planning, yeah. Okay. So that's, okay, nothing new then on that. And then next Wednesday, the Police Advisory Board is meeting to do more steps with the hiring process for the new police positions.
Elaine?
The Community Service Board will meet tomorrow afternoon. I have nothing else to report.
Okay, we'll move that to agenda item number 18. Agenda item number 18, council member individual items. Craig?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor?
Larry?
None.
Glenn?
I have none.
Elaine? David? John?
Nothing.
John, do you want to report on the housing grant? John serves as the chairman of Minnesota Housing Finance Authority for the state, and there is the announcement was actually official today about the award of the grant for the housing. I'll let you explain that.
Oh, okay. Part of the, back on October 19th, part of the awards that were made for grants by Minnesota Housing Finance Agency was one for single-family housing development here in Marshall. It's for 5 homes. Part of the funding is from Minnesota Housing. Some of it's from Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. And then there's funding that's provided by a corporate sponsor through Turkey Valley, and as well as some involvement by the city of Marshall through the EDA and the lots that are available. This is part of a workforce housing program, so working with Turkey Valley, the intent is to start construction this next spring of 5 homes in the Parkway Addition. To be really worked with through the workforce, primarily through Turkey Valley, and that funds then become part of a revolving fund that would allow for continuation of other homes. So as those homes are built, there's some costs that are being reduced by the grants, but the homes themselves would be sold and then the money recirculated to continue with a revolving fund that would expand out, and really hopes at putting quite a few more homes out there, and 6 to 8 more homes primarily in the Parkway Addition. So it's good news for Marshall, a total of $767 million or $1,000. Yeah, it would have been a nice $1 million. But $1,000 that coming in, and that along with the Turkey Valley ends up being at about a $1.1 million project that's being worked on. So,
Well, thank you, John, for your leadership on that. Move then to agenda item number 19, staff reports, starting with Nick.
Just a few items for you, Mayor and Council. We have a workshop coming up on November 15th where we'll review the updated 5-year CIP once again. Then on the 22nd, we will look for the approval of that CIP along with reviewing the general fund. Now that we have more things updated in there, which will coincide with the CIP package. And then we will look at the wastewater and surface water budgets for the utilities and hopefully approve those. And then we will be also reviewing the preliminary public presentation that we will have later on. We're also planning for MMU to have their chloride presentation at the 22nd meeting as well. Other items I have, tomorrow Dennis, Glenn, and I will be meeting to discuss the change orders that we are hoping to bring to council here in the near future and have that settled. And then Ellen will be eventually be another item. We'll be bringing to LNO a change in an ordinance to allow part-time and less employees to serve on local boards and commissions to help facilitate filling those boards and commissions.
Now, can I just make a comment on that? You know, so right now there's a restriction of that restricts full and part-time employees from serving on boards and commissions. And you know, we have part-time permanent employees, but we also have a number of part-time employees, including election judges, that if we were truly following that spirit of that ordinance, even the election judges or, you know, folks that help with park and rec activities in the summer are very, very limited part-time employees, which is a lot of folks within the community that would not be able to serve. So that's a clarification that I think we...
I would even include band members, right, on the community band.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes.
Boy, we don't want to restrict any of that.
Right. So that's the detail or the purpose of what really needs to be discussed.
Thank you for that clarification. That is all I have. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Nicholas? If not, agenda item number 20, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Maybe a follow-up on Councilmember Sturrock's comments at the Airport Commission meeting. It was a good meeting. We had pretty good representation at the meeting, and it was specifically to address concepts of what the scope of work really is. And involved with that is a couple of things that we want to make sure that we address. Certainly, number of flights and type of aircraft that utilize this airport. And it's not only for today, it's for the next 50 years. So it's hard planning out 50 years, but even the next 20 years, we take a look at our current users of the airport, what they currently fly, what they intend to fly in the next 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years. And then that's what establishes the limitations of runway length and site development. So it's important that we do that. We haven't done this type of study for many years. And so that's one of the things. The other thing is what came up to us over the last few years is the availability of what does aeronautical use mean? We were restricted when Action Manufacturing wanted to build out there on the east development area and even committed the possibility of a hangar adjacent and attached to their manufacturing facility. That was not allowed. Okay, so we wanted to identify what true aeronautical needs are at the airport, and then identify those areas that aren't going to be designated for strictly aeronautical needs, but could be used for something else. And something else means all the way to non-aeronautical uses, like, you know, if you want to put a fast food place out there or a hotel or those types of things that aren't really aeronautical uses at all. But the types of uses like we were talking about with Action Manufacturing or other corporate clients is that they'd like to have a presence at the airport for flying in and out with their own aircraft or leased aircraft and be connected to their manufacturing facility. I mean, The question is, why have a hangar and aeronautical use for their company at the airport and then have to drive to the industrial park to see their product? Now, if there's that availability, that maybe you identify a line that on this side of the line is your hangar, and on this side of the line is your industrial development piece, why not? And that's really a good question for us at this airport. We believe that we have the capability in the next 50 years, 20 years, to have that need out there. And not have to have your industrial use out at the industrial park and then drive into the corporate hangar. So that was a couple of our main discussions and concerns with this development, is to make them understand the needs of this airport and this region, this community. And I think now that it's in the hopper, it will be addressed. So I think that was a good discussion to have. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Questions for Glenn? Not. Agenda item number 21, Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A few items. At last week, they met after the council meeting in a work session and discussed funding of additional police officers. Chief Yant and I met with Mary Martins Friday of this week to kind of go over expectations, understandings for a memorandum of understanding that'll be drafted and circulated in the near future, and hopefully that'll be brought back for council approval on the 22nd. Continue to work on various sponsorship agreements for the Red Baron Arena and Expo. There are, and changing the subject a bit, sometimes Ilya's office as building official, we get complaints from neighbors regarding, how their neighbors are maintaining or not maintaining their property. We have accumulation of building materials or garbage. What is, pleasurable to look at from one person might be garbage to another person. So I have recently, I met with 3 separate homeowners that if we don't get compliance from the building official's office, it's turned over to me to try to resolve some things. I met with various homeowners. One yesterday, one today. Well, a group, the Islamic Society, regarding their mosque at 911 West Main Street. A group of gentlemen came in yesterday to talk to me about that situation. Now, it's a difficult situation, but they have been very responsive and respectful. So we'll hopefully be able to come back to council with some resolution of that. I'm not sure yet, but they have been responsive to the request for discussion. They have not just ignored the city. Apparently lots of things are happening out in Parkway 2. Mr. Kramer represented the grant. Last week, the EDA closed on the sale of 8 additional lots in Parkway 2 for private development out there. So it's good to see something happening again by way of development in the Parkway additions. And as City Administrator Johnson indicated, Glenn, Nick, and I are meeting tomorrow to discuss the change orders and presentation to council. And next Monday, the 7th, again, staff is meeting to discuss policies and procedures, operational issues related to the Red Baron Arena as well. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Dennis? If not, we'll move to agenda item number 22, pending agenda items. Questions about the pending agenda items? 2 things that probably should be added to that would be the food preparation area at the concession stand at the ball fields at the complex. And then a longer-term pending agenda items would be the disposition of the ball fields along Channel Parkway once they are decommissioned. Any other questions about the pending agenda items? If not, agenda item number 23, the information items. Which brings us then to agenda item number 24, the listing of upcoming meetings. And then agenda item number 25, to consider adjourning this meeting.
Move.
Motion by Larry, seconded by David to adjourn discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes.